Today, I want to discuss humility, a common feature that you can find in almost all great leaders, and certainly in many of the good characters in the Bible, is humility. Now, humility is usually seen in the wrong light. When people think of humility in modern times, they seem to think that it means to think lowly of one's self or to not think highly of oneself. And that can give you a decent picture of what it means. It's not a completely wrong definition, but I like this definition better, having an accurate view of oneself. And a definition that I think fits it quite well is not thinking positively of one's self unless it's necessary. And what I mean by that is someone who's humble doesn't immediately denounce themselves as worthy enough to do something. Instead, they just don't promote themselves whenever it's not necessary. If they did something, then they're going to take credit for it. But if they didn't do something, then they're going to say, I didn't do that, I don't deserve credit. That's humility. It isn't thinking of oneself as not worthy of anything, but thinking of oneself as being worthy of what you're worthy of. And that's why I kind of like the definition of having an accurate view of oneself. Because humility, in some real sense, does require you to understand who you truly are. And when you get to understand who you truly are, there are two real things that you're going to realize. The first is that you can really be a terrible person if you're put in a specific situation, um, and that's your fault. You can choose to be a terrible person anywhere. And there's another thing which is a little bit more hopeful, and that's that you could really be a good person. Now, let's talk about being a good person a little bit. When I say being a good person, I don't mean someone who doesn't sin. By good person, I mean someone who has the capacity to sin and who chooses not to, and those are actually different. You can have somebody, let's say we have person A, who doesn't have a lot of money. Well, the fact that they're not necessarily greedy because they don't have a big house or a big car isn't a moral virtue because they don't have enough money to spend on all that stuff. And it's not a good thing that they aren't buying those things because they simply don't have the ability to. However, if you have a person who is rich and who instead of buying a nicer house for themselves or buying a nice car or whatever, they choose to spend that money on something good. Let's use charity for example. They give away most of their money because they're not greedy. That person, person B, is actually a morally good person. And I'm not saying that the poor person isn't because they're poor. I'm just saying that the fact they haven't spent a whole bunch of money on useless material things isn't a moral virtue that they get to proclaim. So a good person has the capacity to do evil and chooses to do good. And with both the good within you and the evil within you, you can orient those two things towards a high aim. And you have to understand those and you have to accept those. You have to accept who you truly are before you can change. That's a quote from Carl Rogers is the curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change. And in this sense, accepting yourself doesn't mean understanding who you are and saying that it's okay to be who you are. Rather, it's understanding who you are and also understanding the necessity of you needing to change. Because if you truly want to accept yourself, you're going to have to accept the fact that you have a large capacity for evil. And only a evil person would accept the fact that they're evil and then choose to remain evil. A morally good person recognizes their capacity for violence, their capacity for greed, or for whatever, and they choose to orient themselves towards the highest possible aim or something like the kingdom of heaven. And this is all embedded in the idea of humility. You can't just be humble by saying, oh, I'm not worthy of this thing that I'm obviously not worthy about. That isn't really the idea. The idea is figuring out who you are, and that is the hero's journey. When you go on the hero's journey, which is a adventure into unknown lands, you are not only going to discover some realities about the world because you are going into the unknown, so of course you are going to learn something. You are going into the unknown, and so you are going to learn things about the world. But the hero's journey is more complicated than that, because when you go out and you go to, let's say, change something about the world, you're also discovering something that is within you. And so this hero's journey is really a journey into the depths of yourself. It is a commitment to discovering what's within you. And when we go into the unknown, when we are in the desert, whenever we are challenged and we don't have a clear sight of what we are supposed to do, that is the situation that can either bring out the best in us or the worst in us. And that is our choice. The people who do not accept who they truly are susceptible to who they truly are coming out in a negative manner that is destructive to the world and also to themselves. But the people who accept who they truly are and therefore understand who they truly are, who choose to orient that towards the highest possible aim, or the kingdom of heaven, are the same people who we can consider to be morally good, or who we can consider to be a hero.